Hello, friends. Today I'm going to read us about Mary McCleod Bethune. She is a woman of courage. Front cover, spine, back cover, which also shows other books by these people. She is a famous African American. Our infamous title page, Mary McCleod Bethune, Woman of Courage. It was the summer of 1875. Patsy and Sam McCleod's 15th child was born. Her name was Mary Jane McCleod. It was a happy time for the family. Patsy and Sam had been slaves. Mary Jane was their first child born free. That made Mary Jane McCleod special. Mary Jane grew up in a large and loving family in Maysville, South Carolina. She rode Old Bush, the family mule, to the fields. She picked cotton along with her brothers and sisters on her father's farm. One day, Mary Jane went with her mother to a large house. Her mother washed and ironed for the people who lived there. Mary Jane had never been in such a big house. A young girl who lived there showed Mary Jane around. This is a picture of the log cabin that she grew up in. That's where she lived. There was a book on a table. Mary Jane opened it. Suddenly, the girl took it away, saying, "Put that book down. You can't read it anyway." Mary Jane was surprised and hurt. True, she couldn't read, but why did picking up the book make the other girl so angry? The McCleods had a Bible. Nobody could read it. That night, Mary Jane held the book in her hand. "I will read," she said. "God willing, I will read." One day, Miss Emma Wilson came to Maysville. She told Sam and Patsy about the school she was starting. And would they send Mary Jane to the school? Sam didn't think so. He needed everybody to help in the fields. Mary Jane prayed softly. Patsy spoke to Sam alone. At last, Sam gave in. Mary Jane could go to school. Mary Jane's brothers and sisters were disappointed. Why couldn't she read? Why couldn't she read after the first day of school? It took time. Before long, Mary Jane did learn how to read and write. On one special night, she read the Bible to her mother and father. They were so proud. Miss Wilson's school went to the sixth grade. A kind woman paid for Mary Jane to go to the Scotia Seminary in Concord, North Carolina. So in 1887, Mary Jane went away to school. That's kind of how their school looked. She was just 12 years old. It was so lonely at first. She missed her family very much. 7 years later, Mary finished Scotia. Then she went to Moody Bible College in Chicago. Mary Jane McCleod was ready to start her life's work. But what would it be? She wondered. As a young woman, Mary Jane wanted to teach and help others. That's Mary Jane McCleod. Mary wanted to teach in Africa. Instead, she took a teaching job in Georgia. Good teachers were needed there. Mary met Albertus Bethune. He was a teacher too. He made her laugh. They were happy together. In 1898, Mary and Albertus married. A year later, their son was born. His name was Albert McCleod Bethune. Everyone called him Bert. Mrs. Bethune had heard that there was no school for black children in Daytona Beach, Florida. Mrs. Bethune went there. "I want to start a school for Negro girls," she said. All she had was $1.50. Some people laughed, others helped. Mrs. Bethune would not give up her dream. First, she rented a small house. She found writing paper in the trash. She had to use boxes for desks and coal for pencils. It was a poor beginning. But on October 3rd, 1904, Mrs. Bethune opened her school. She had 5 students. By 1905, the school had 100 students and 3 teachers. Next, she bought land that had been the city trash dump. That is where she would build her school. Some people laughed, but others helped. Rich, important people gave money to help build her school and the hospital, too. The first building for the school was finished in 1906. It was called Faith Hall because Faith had built it. Mrs. Bethune worked hard to start a school for black girls. Here is a picture of her with her students. In 1923, Mrs. Bethune's school joined with Cookman, an all-boys school. Bethune-Cookman became a grade school, high school, and college. Boys and girls went to school together. Mrs. Bethune was the school's first president, but to her students she was always just Mother Dear. Another name for Mrs. Bethune was the Black Rose. This is how she got that name. Mrs. Bethune spoke all over the country. One idea she talked about was a big people garden. She said that people are like flowers. They live together in the world just as flowers grow in the garden. Red, yellow, small, tall, all growing together. They are all different, but each one is lovely. Mrs. Bethune was a good speaker. She spoke at churches and schools all over the country. This is her speaking. Once a child said to Mrs. Bethune that blacks couldn't live in the people garden. There were no black flowers. This made Mrs. Bethune feel sad. Just because you have not seen a thing doesn't mean it doesn't exist, she always said. Years later, she got a wonderful surprise. While in the country of Holland, Mrs. Bethune was given the bulbs of black tulips, the first black flower. And in Switzerland, Mrs. Bethune was shown the black rose. This made her very happy. She ordered 72 black rose bushes. They were planted at Bethune-Cookman College. She also had black tulips planted at the entrance of her school. In 1932, Franklin D. Roosevelt was elected President of the United States. The President asked Mrs. Bethune to serve in the National Youth Administration. This organization helped people ages 16 to 24 find part-time jobs. Mrs. Bethune was the first African American woman to hold a job that high up in the government. It was an honor. Mrs. Eleanor Roosevelt was the president's wife. She was a friend to Mrs. Bethune. At the time, some people didn't think a black person should be invited to the White House, but the Roosevelts did. Mrs. Bethune was always welcome at the White House and in the Oval Office, too. Here's a picture of the black flowers. Once Mrs. Bethune went to see the president. It is good to see you, he said. I don't know why, Mrs. Bethune replied. I'm always asking for something. Yes, said the president, but you never ask for yourself. It was true. Mrs. Bethune worked hard in the NYA. She tried to help young students find work so they could go to school. On April 25, 1945, Mrs. Bethune took part in the founding of the United Nations. Countries from all over the world agreed to work together for peace. Mrs. Bethune lived the rest of her life at Bethune-Cookman College. There she died of a heart attack on May 18, 1955. The school that Mary McCleod Bethune started with $1.50 is still in Daytona Beach. It helps prove that hard work can make dreams come true. As a teacher and a leader, Mrs. Bethune spent her life helping young people. There's a picture of the older Mrs. Bethune. That's the end of our story. That's crazy. She died 2 days before my mom was born. Well, I hope that you learned something. I learned. I didn't know that she was helped start the United Nations. I did know that she had a school. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you learned something like I did about Mary McCleod Bethune. And I hope you enjoyed this story. I will talk to you soon. Have a great day.